Europe is at war. 77 years after the guns fell silent in the Second World War, the continent is back on the battlefield. All the guesswork, all the diplomacy, all the confusion has ended. Russia has invaded Ukraine. The attack began early this morning.
Ukraine has also said in its latest statement that 50 Russian soldiers have been killed and 25 have even surrendered. The news that's just coming in is that more than 70 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed.
Footage from the Ukrainian military appears to show multiple attacks half a mile down the road. As a Russian column was hit, a voice says, "We were ambushed. The commander was killed."
In Russia, they are grieving too. Mikhail was killed in action in Ukraine.
They were killed while they slept. 2 rockets, which hit these military barracks with devastating accuracy. The bodies of around 50 soldiers, possibly more, now buried under rubble.
Russia claims Ukraine struck the Donetsk region at a railway station where thousands of people were waiting to leave. There is a video that is going viral, and the Ukrainian media isn't talking about it. The Russian media is using the video to claim that their soldiers were tortured.
Right here, the Ukrainian forces captured 2 Russian soldiers. One of them was still alive and gasping. Then a soldier shot the man twice, and after the man kept moving, the soldier shot him again, and the man stopped.
Breaking right now, an American has died while fighting alongside Ukrainian forces.
Young children left fatherless, wives widowed, over and over and over every day.
Now, this is pretty unpleasant, but behind me on the side of the road are the bodies of 2 dead Russian soldiers.
Russian state television on Thursday broadcast footage of 2 Brits and a Moroccan who were captured while fighting for Ukraine being sentenced to death.
As the fight for eastern Ukraine continues to intensify, a former British soldier has been killed fighting for Ukraine in the city of Severodonetsk.
According to the latest Amnesty International report, Russia has killed hundreds of civilians in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv.
At least 23 people, including children, were killed in a cruise missile attack. More than 60 were injured, needing hospital treatment.
According to a local newspaper obituary, 52-year-old Steven Zabilski was fighting in Ukraine when he died in May.
The Ukrainian military said that it had killed 106 Russian troops.
Thousands have been caught in the crossfire. We saw shards of metal and a pair of boots and shallow graves where Russian soldiers have been buried. Certainly dead bodies here. You can smell them. She says many of the country's best soldiers have already been lost. She now treats their less experienced replacements.
At the city cemetery of Anapa, a whole sector was set aside for the Russian military who were killed in Ukraine. The first burials appeared here in early March.
And now to the war that is causing some of this food crisis. Russia bombed several key Ukrainian cities today, including Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city.
It was immediately obvious that the attack on a Russian airbase in Crimea was a big one. Thick clouds of smoke could be seen from miles away, and the explosions sent Russian tourists heading for cover.
Breaking news from Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky says at least 15 people have died in a Russian airstrike on a train station in the central part of the country. This attack on a day laden with both hope and sorrow.
Serhiy Haidai, the head of the Luhansk Oblast Military Administration, reported that approximately 200 occupiers were killed as a result of an explosion in the occupied Sawataway on the night of 17th of September.
The UN says nearly 6,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine since the beginning of the Russian invasion. That includes almost 400 children.
We begin with some breaking news from Ukraine, where a missile has struck a convoy of vehicles, killing dozens of civilians in Zaporizhia. The destroyed cars and vans were packed with travelers. The regional governor said at least 23 civilians are dead, with more wounded.
Video circulating shows the results of Ukrainian soldiers bombing a civilian convoy, trying to go into Russian-controlled territory. Ukrainian army did it again. About 80 civilians were killed.
Now we have news this morning on the war in Ukraine. Rescue operations are underway in Zaporizhia after Russian missiles hit residential buildings in the city. The region's governor says one person is confirmed dead.
The frontline residents are now burying the Russian soldiers they're finding, often under fire. She'd only just retired. Now she feels lucky if she lives through each night.
Again, there were strikes on civilian targets, it seems, with a high-rise building being hit, many houses being hit. The death toll, as we understand it at the moment, is 17. 5 houses destroyed, 40 damaged.
This morning, the U.S. State Department confirms another American citizen has been killed fighting in Ukraine. Dane Partridge of Idaho reportedly died in the eastern Donbass region.
Russia says 11 people have been killed in a shooting at its southern border with Ukraine. The defense ministry says 2 attackers opened fire at a military training ground in Belgorod. The area has been shelled in recent days in what Russian officials say were missile strikes by Ukrainian forces.
Somewhere in this forlorn corner of a not-so-forgotten battlefield, 6 Ukrainian soldiers are missing, believed dead. Leonid Bondar and his 2-man military recovery team have come to look for them.
Russian officials are pushing back against allegations in a letter believed to come from an elite Marine group that says that they suffered major casualties in an attack in Eastern Europe.
Some breaking news now, and the family of a British man who's joined Ukraine's armed forces says he has died.
U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mark Milley saying well over 100,000 Russian soldiers have either been killed or wounded in the 9-month war so far.
Russian soldiers are being killed in large numbers in the conflict with Ukraine, with some being called up to fight despite having serious health issues.
The Russian invasion has triggered the biggest confrontation between Moscow and the West since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine has brought death, devastation, and unspeakable suffering. We all remember the horrors of Bucha. It is estimated that more than 20,000 civilians and more than 100,000 Ukrainian military officers have been killed so far.
According to the minister's report on Tuesday, Ukrainian troops killed 16,970 Russian invaders in November. This is the highest number of Russian losses since Kremlin unleashed its invasion of Ukraine since February. Ukrainian troops killed another 430 Russian soldiers and destroyed 23 unmanned aerial vehicles in the past 24 hours.
Tonight, Ukraine's single deadliest attack against Russia in months, using American-supplied HIMARS rockets to level this vocational college that Russia had been using as a barracks for newly recruited troops in the east. Russia's Ministry of Defense saying 63 Russian soldiers died. Earlier today, Ukraine's military said as many as 400 newly recruited Russian soldiers were killed.
Let's get the latest on the war in Ukraine. Joining us is military analyst Philip Ingram. Good to see you. Now, we were talking an hour ago, and immediately after you went, we got this news in from the Russian Defense Ministry talking about some kind of airstrike which has killed hundreds of Ukrainian troops. What more do we know?
The Russian military claims to have carried out deadly missile strikes on barracks used by Ukrainian troops in retaliation for the deaths of dozens of Russian soldiers in a rocket attack a week ago.